I think in the medical community, especially for people on the front lines, there's kind of two thoughts right now about kind of interacting with your family and talking to your family about what's going on. The first is to get angry. And I think I think a lot of doctors are looking around the country right now, especially doctors in New York, and thinking that people aren't taking this seriously. There's kind of a desire to scare people into kind of getting serious. But I was working last night, and I think that there's a second kind of feeling out there right now. And I think that this is what I'm feeling right now, is that doctors like myself are in a very unique position to actually empower people right now. And what I mean by empower is to learn about this disease. The reason I want to have this call is because I don't want you guys to be scared. We're 3 months into this in the medical world, and we understand this disease. And so I'm going to go through kind of ways to protect your family, and then what to do if and when, given the size of this call, it's a when, someone gets COVID, and how we can protect our circle. You may hear a little inflection in my voice, like I'm emotional. It's not because I'm scared. It's actually the opposite. For the first time in a while, I'm actually not scared. And so I'm going to share with you why that is. So just a quick introduction as to what's going on in New York. I work at probably the premier hospital in New York City. It is a 1,200 bed hospital. We do everything from surgery to transplants, lung transplants, heart transplants. At this point, we do none of that. Almost none of that. Our hospital is almost exclusively a COVID-19 hospital. People enter through a secure gate in the front, where in the past, what I've been doing is seeing old people with pneumonias or seeing people with bleeds. Almost exclusively what I do all day long is see people with COVID-19. But we're learning, and we know a lot. And what I want you guys to know is that every single day we're getting better. We know more. And I am confident that the stuff I can tell you today should make you guys feel like when this comes to your community, that you don't have to be scared and that you can protect your family. So the first thing is just, what is COVID-19? I mean, it's now every single news story, it's political, it's economic, but what is this disease? So this is a virus. It's from what we would colloquially think of as a common cold family, the coronavirus family. But what's unique is that the human body has never seen this virus before. And so this obviously started in Wuhan. The thought is that it came probably from an animal and then made its way into the human body for the first time. And so one of the common questions I get is, what does this disease look like? And so what commonly people have is they have fever, and they have cough, and then they have sore throat. And when they get this, the virus goes through their entire body. And what we have found is that the most likely place that this will affect is your lungs. And so people will commonly have cough. But for about 80% of people, you just don't feel good, is the most common thing. You have a mild cough, maybe you have a little headache. The disease lasts, from what we're seeing, between 5 to 7 to 14 days is probably the best accurate description. Some people who have a mild disease, by about day 5, are starting to feel better. And then people who aren't feeling better usually start to get short of breath around day 3 to 5, and then start to feel better around that 7-day mark. And so what is the first kind of big topic we're going to talk about? And I think the reason I wanted to have this call is how to protect your family. And I think we've learned a lot, and I want to kind of share all the stuff that I've learned so far with you guys. So I think the first thing is, how do you get COVID? And I think that this is really important, and we've really learned a lot over the last couple of weeks to months about how you get this disease. And so the overarching theme is sustained contact with someone who has this disease, which the vast majority is people with fever and aches, or someone who is about to get the disease. So someone in the next 1 to 2 days who is going to develop symptoms of this disease. And so the way that you get this is the transmission of the virus almost exclusively from your hands to your face. From your hands to your face. And so it's either into your eyes, into your nose, or into your mouth. So there's a lot of talk about contact or getting it through contact, hands to face. There's also a small thought that it can be aerosolized, that it can kind of exist a little bit in the air. The thought at this point is that you actually have to have very long, sustained contact with someone. And I'm talking about over 15 to 30 minutes in an unprotected environment, meaning you're in a very closed room without any type of mask, for you to get it that way. But to very simply state, the overwhelming majority of people are getting this by physically touching someone who has this disease or will develop it in the next 1 to 2 days, and then touching their face. And so that actually, I think, is incredibly empowering. And that's, as I've been in the hospital the last 2 days, the thing that makes me smile a little bit is that I actually know now that I won't get this disease because I know how to protect myself. And so I just want to give you guys a few very, very practical tips to how to protect yourself. Okay, a simple statement of fact. COVID is in your community. I'm going to say that again. Whether you live in Texas, whether you live in Tennessee, whether you live in Florida, it is in your community right now. That is not to scare you. That is to just tell you so that you can then take the steps that I'm talking about and not be scared. Know where your hands are and know that they're clean at all times. So very simply, for what this means for me in the city is that I walk around with Purell. So walk around with Purell. And so when I leave my apartment, everything that I see that I'm going to touch, I make sure that I Purell first. So when I leave my apartment door and I go to the elevator, it's okay that if I touch it with my hand, but then I Purell it. When I go downstairs and I open the door, it's okay to touch the door. You can open it with your elbow, but if you touch the door, then I make sure to Purell it. So we know that if you keep your hands clean, that you're not going to get this. The second point is that this is not a disease that we're getting because someone is sick and touched something and then an entire community of 10 people get it because they touched that. It's mostly from sustained contact with people who have COVID-19. Out of abundance of caution, we also make sure that everything we touch, we're cleaning our hands. The second thing is you have to start psychologically working on the connection between your hands and your face. So I'm terrible at this. I touch my face all the time, literally all the time. You don't even realize it. You move your hand, you scratch your nose. And so the virus has taken advantage of this. And the reason why everyone gets this disease is because you have sustained contact with someone. So someone at a party has this and you shake their hand, right? And then you touch your face. It's that simple. That is how you get this disease. So what does that mean? I think there's two practical things that you can do. One is just to start to be aware of when you touch your face. Atul Gawande, who is a Harvard-trained surgeon, I think is very famous, actually has a recommendation for people to just start wearing masks. And the idea here is not that the mask is going to prevent you from getting COVID, because as I said, it's not a disease that you're most likely getting from the air. But the reason to put on a mask is because, and I do this in the hospital, is you stop touching your face. And so what I would recommend is now when you're leaving your house is to wear a mask. And I think those two things combined is incredibly powerful and will prevent the transmission of the disease into your family in 99% of cases. To know your hands are clean and to not touch your face, period. 3, you don't need a medical mask. You don't need a medical mask. These masks that people are wearing are not protecting them from getting the disease. And front care healthline workers need these masks right now. That's not to say don't wear a medical mask. If you have one, that's great, put it on. But it doesn't mean you have to have a wild supply of masks or N95s or anything like that. The general community has zero need for an N95 mask, zero. In the hospital, where all I do is take care of patients with COVID-19, I only wear a mask, of N95 mask, if I'm in the room with that patient doing something that's going to make them have aerosolization of the virus. That is no one in the community. So to summarize, always know where your hands are. And what I mean by that is when you leave, just become aware of when you're touching stuff that's not from your protected home environment. So if you're going to go to the grocery store, if you're going to touch the cart, just clean the handle. If you go into the store and you see people around, don't touch them. It's incredibly simple. The 4th thing that I'll say, which is the thing that the government is talking about and kind of is the same principle, is distance yourself. And so this is incredibly fascinating in New York City now, is that nobody is going within 3 to 6 feet of each other. And it actually has not changed our life that much. And so I think when you go to the pharmacy, because people are going to the pharmacy now, you don't have to wait directly in line with someone. You can stand a couple feet back. And so the 4 things, I think I said 4 things. Always know where your hands are and have Purell. When you touch stuff that's outside your home, just make sure that you're washing your hand. Start to learn how to not touch your face. A really good way to do that is to start wearing a mask when you're out. And if you want to practice, wear a mask when you're home. Number 3 is you don't need an N95 mask or a medical mask. Any mask will do, because this is not preventing the disease. This is training you. You don't have to be scared of the outside world now. You don't have to be scared of your neighbor. And I have actually found that to be incredibly liberating right now. So in New York City, we're receiving food from delivery men. We have to go outside to the grocery store. It's a time when we're all really scared. And I think it's what makes it worse is to when you go outside and to look and think that the person next to you is going to somehow harm you or harm your family. But when you know that the only way you're going to get this disease is if your hands are dirty, and that if you touch your face, and that if you are way too close to that person, that becomes incredibly liberating. And then all of a sudden, the person at the store is not your enemy. There's someone who's going through this with you. The delivery person is not your enemy. They're a hero. They're going out and delivering food at a time when there's a communicable disease that they don't understand. When you understand this disease and know exactly what to do to prevent getting it, then it allows us for the next couple of weeks to months to be able to sustain the system that we have. We have to be able to have mail. We have to be able to get delivery and seamless in New York City. It's the only way we eat. But if you can protect yourself and you know your family's safe, then I think that's empowering. Socially, it's incredibly important, and we did this at my mom's house, is you have to shrink your social circle. And so what I would highly encourage you guys to do as the country is shutting down is find your isolation group, find your group of 3 people, 4 people, your family, and set boundaries. That is it. The people who are going to get this are people who are maintaining large social circles at this point. So what did that mean for my family? Is so Gene Young and our kids and my mom are on the farm. They're at the Hopewell house. And that is exclusively the social circle that they're circling in. They talk to their family every day. They see people, like through FaceTime, but there's no one coming in and out of the house. They can still go to the store, and you can go to the store without any fear, because if you wash your hands and you don't touch your face, you're not going to get this disease. And so it's very important at this point to keep your social circles small, What do you do if you get this disease? And this is, I think, if you listen to nothing else through this entire thing, just please listen to this part. In Wuhan, China, throughout the world, the vast majority of spread of COVID-19 is through home and family transmission. So I'll say that again. Throughout the world, the way this is transmitted is from husband to wife, father to son, daughter to brother, whatever. And so, again, that's incredibly scary, but it's also something that, if you understand the rules, is incredibly empowering. So what do? If you develop a fever and you are otherwise fine, and isolate yourself from your family. So what does that mean? It's just simply about the same rules about hands and touching your face. Is you don't want sustained contact with the person who's sick to the point where you're going to be able to pick this up off of surfaces or off their person and then touch your face. So what are people recommending? If you're able, have the person in a separate room. If you're able, have the person who's sick have their own bathroom. If the person has to come out and interact with people in the family, this is a perfect indication for one medical mask. And the reason is you want to put the mask on the person who's sick. And so if in our apartment, if I was sick and I had to come out and interact with my family, before I would leave the bedroom, I would wash my hands, I would put on a mask, and then I would go out and maybe I would sit down and eat food at the table. And then after that, when I was done, I would eat the food, I would put it in the sink, I would make sure that anything I touched, which is a very simple area on the table, is just washed, and then I would go back to my room. And so the point is to not have sustained contact with someone in your home who has this disease. You're gonna wanna take care of them. You're gonna wanna be in and out of there. How are you doing? Checking their temperature. Don't do it. If you're touching the temperature probe constantly to their mouth, that is where the disease exists. And then you're going to get it on your hands, and then you're going to touch your face. And so you shouldn't be scared to stay at home with your family with a fever if you have COVID-19. The vast majority of people are going to have a fever, body aches, feel like shit for 3 to 5 days, feel a little less shit on 7, and then they're going to start to feel better. You can start interacting with your family more as you feel better, as your fever is gone, but you're still going to be vigilant. You're going to be washing your hands. You're going to be a lot more confident 20 days out from the disease than you are 10 days out from the disease. The current recommendation from the CDC is that if I get sick and if I'm feeling better, I can put on a mask and go to work. And so I think that that is a good indication to you that that's when you can start interacting with your family, is that if you have COVID and you've recovered and you've isolated in your room for 7 days and you've been able to get food, and when you've been with your family, you've worn a mask and you're feeling better, come back out to your family's life, keep a mask on and wash your hands. What do I do if I have a mild cold? And so I think given how rampant COVID-19 is at this point, I think if you have something that feels like a cold or you feel like you're getting sick, is take the precautions like you have COVID-19 for 1 to 2 days. If in 1 to 2 days you're feeling much better, and this is like the 1,000 other colds that you've had in the past year because you have kids, you don't have COVID-19. And then you can go back to your completely normal living at home life with your family. So I think it's just important. The place we get into danger is people being too cavalier when they're developing symptoms and exposing their family too early. And then when they get fevers and they're staying at home, is that they're having too much interaction with your family. You can have COVID-19 in your house and everyone else not get it and be protected and be completely safe. There are a couple exceptions to that, and I think this is important. If you have a vulnerable population in your family, so if you're living with your lovely 95-year-old grandmother, if there's someone in your house who had recent chemotherapy and someone in the house gets sick, you need to find another living arrangement for that patient or practice incredibly, incredibly strict isolation of that family member. We know that the older population is the sickest population when they get this disease. And so that is the one caveat to it's safe to stay home with your family is if you have someone who's incredibly vulnerable, you need to set up a situation in the house where they're completely isolated from the person who is sick. Maybe you could have another person take care of that family member in your house so you have no interaction. But simply being in the home with someone with COVID-19 will not get you that disease. It goes back to the same three principles. It's touching a person or a surface who has COVID-19 and then touching your face. When do you go to the hospital? And so I think probably the question that a lot of people are asking is, if I get COVID-19 and I feel short of breath, am I just going to go to the hospital and die? This is where I'm probably the most qualified person in the country to comment on what it looks like when people are coming into the hospital and sick. So first, who should go to the hospital? If you're feeling short of breath, come to the hospital. That is the rule. That is the clearest thing. It's not, I have a fever. It's not, I think I have COVID-19. It's not, I can't stop having those body aches. It's, I feel short of breath when I get up to go to the bathroom. Those are people that should come to the hospital and be evaluated. At Cornell right now, what we're doing is a lot of the people that come to the emergency room, we're sending home to live out the 4 or 5 days of their disease so that they can feel better. And we say, oh, you look completely fine, go home. But what we're also seeing is that people that feel short of breath, who come to the hospital, some of them go onto the floor and just are short of breath for 5 to 6, 7 days, and then they go home. So of the entire population of people who get COVID-19, about 10% need to go to the hospital because they get short of breath. Of the 10% who are coming to the hospital, about 1 to 2 to 3% of those are requiring admission to the ICU and to be put on a ventilator. So what happens when people get put on ventilators? The vast majority of people, overwhelming majority of people, come off the ventilator. And they usually come off the ventilator 7 to 10 days later. But I think the important thing for you guys to know is going to the hospital is not a death sentence. It's a safe place for you to be. Go to the hospital when you're short of breath. Don't go to the hospital just because you have COVID-19. And then I think the question that we're going to get a billion times over, and I don't have a perfect answer for you at this point because it's different in every community, which is, should I get tested if I have the disease? If I'm a generic 35-year-old who's sick, I think it depends on the availability of testing in your community. What we know right now that people are home, is that if you have, and not having a lot of social contact, is that if you have diseases like, if you have symptoms like the flu, it's likely you have COVID-19. And nothing that I've told you about behavior, about interacting with your family, a lot of that stuff would change by knowing that test result. The caveat is if your community, whether that's New York or Tennessee, is testing a lot and you have clear access to testing, absolutely getting a test is a good idea, because when it's negative, then in a day when you're feeling better, you can have full interaction with your family. So I think that is the key. But if you live in a community where there's very rare testing going on at this point, do not try and jump the line to someone who's actually short of breath and really not doing well, just to make yourself feel better, to know that you have it. Just take the precautions in your home that I said, and then as testing ramps up, then we'll be able to get more people tested.